I never imagined my Tuesday morning would begin with a flicker and a darkness that swallowed the hum of generators and the whisper of wind turbines I'd spent years installing on my family's land. But when I awoke to an empty silence and checked the control panel that read 0, I sensed more than a mechanical failure. I sensed malice. Buried in my bones was the memory of that midnight email, stern and final, ordering my power shut off for supposed non-compliance with HOA bylaws in a subdivision I'd never joined or even visited yet. Here it was. A legal diktat from a self-appointed tyrant named Margaret Karen Hawthorne, who claimed her little board outranked federal easements and municipal contracts, but she'd forgotten one minor detail. I owned every transformer, every mile of line, and every ounce of juice coursing through those wires. Instantly I pounded the panel's emergency override and felt vibration underfoot. It hummed back to life, only to die again seconds later. That's when I realized this wasn't power sabotage but a declaration of war. The hollow click of the phone as I dialed the county sheriff reverberated through my insulated control room. He answered groggily and I said, "You need to come out here to just cut my power." He hesitated and mumbled about jurisdiction, so I pulled out the incorporation documents, the grid contracts, the land deeds showing I was both the landowner and utility provider. I could almost hear the gears in his sleepy brain grinding to life as he realized I literally owned the grid they lived on. Hours later I stood in the dusty parking lot opposite HOA Karen, her arms crossed, face flushed with indignation. Behind tinted aviators a battered wooden sign stood next to her. The same scrawled message from my prompt. Power cut, property violator. My black Chevy pickups and utility trucks lined the edge like guard dogs. She barked. "You're trespassing on HOA rules," I replied, voice low but steady. "These lines run through my property to my property, and I have every legal right to power my own facility." A hush fell over the small crowd of neighbors. She'd rallied to her side, some confused, some eager for spectacle, but I noticed one unexpected face at her shoulder. My old high school rival, Rick Thompson, reeling from an earlier feud over water rights. He smirked, arms folded, betraying I wasn't the only one she'd wronged. That twist revealed her hypocrisy. She'd allied with Rick to divert my irrigation water last spring, and I'd quietly rerouted my reservoir to bypass their private pond, leaving them scrambling to fill their fancy koi tank with bottled water. The truth stung Karen's lip as she spat. "This is HOA property, and I have the power to enforce compliance." I stepped forward until our noses almost touched, voice quiet but filled with steel. "You have no authority here, Karen. Only the shame of abusing the people you claim to serve." Then the backup Ayurvedic uniformed deputies who scanned deeds, bylaws, and county records. They escorted Karen away from the substation like a craven child caught in a scheme. I flipped a switch and neon lights along the turbine towers blazed on, casting long shadows across the red dirt road. People gasped and whispered as the facility roared to life. Power not just restored but amplified to every home on my land, including Karen's modest cabin across the way. She learned the hard way that I controlled more than electricity. I controlled the infrastructure that kept their air conditioners humming and their Wi-Fi alive. In the aftermath, neighbors approached, eyes ashamed, murmuring apologies as I offered them a tour of the renewable microgrid we'd built to supply clean energy to the county. After seeing solar fields stretching over acres, wind turbines spinning like watchers on the horizon, and water from my wells freely flowing through recycled irrigation channels, they realized the real villain had been HOA Karen's ego and ignorance. As twilight deepened, I walked past the new wooden sign I'd erected beside hers. "Power on Know Your Owner," scribbled in the same rough hand as her decree. Tears welled in her eyes as I handed her a copy of the grid charter I'd personally drawn up to provide free power to all residents within 2 miles of my site. If she read it, she never showed interest. Pride kept her lip curled and shoulders stiff, but the crowd burst into applause as the generator hum rose in triumphant chorus. That evening, that's when I felt the old fire of justice surge through me and understood why I dedicated my life to this grid, not for profit or fame, but to remind entitled people that power isn't something you demand from others, it's something you earn through service. When I packed up to leave later that night, Karen sniffed. "You think you've taught me a lesson?" I paused by my truck, gazed at the turbines illuminated against the moonlit sky, and replied, "I taught all of us that community trumps control." Her shoulders slumped as I drove off down the access road, lights fading in the distance, leaving behind a neighborhood forever changed. Now I invite you to decide. Was shutting off my power a justified act of HOA justice or a petty abuse of authority? Share your take, right or wrong. As dawn broke, a hush settled over the valley like the calm after a storm. Neighbors gathering at the edges of my solar fields, faces illuminated by the morning light and the glow of turbines still spinning from the night's triumph. I stood atop the maintenance platform overlooking rows of solar panels, everyone a testament to the sweat and grit poured into this project, and I watched as the community trickled in. Farmers in dusty boots, young families pushing strollers past charging stations powered entirely by sunlight, retirees who once scoffed at renewable energy now swapping stories under the shade of a mobile charging canopy. Among them I spotted Karen Hawthorne, her posture rigid, cheeks still pink from yesterday's embarrassment. She lingered at the fringe, arms folded, eyes darting from panel to panel as though expecting them to explode. I climbed down and approached her, heart pounding with equal parts triumph and compassion because winning did not mean crushing someone underfoot, but inviting them to stand on common ground. I glanced at the crowds milling about Rick Thompson offering me an awkward wave, the koi pond truck parked empty to his left, and I realized how hollow their petty alliances must feel now. My voice carried across the field as I said, "Morning, Karen." She nodded curtly. I gestured to the workshop behind me, its doors open to reveal technicians calibrating inverters and checking battery banks. "Come see," I said. Hesitantly she stepped inside, her gaze flicking over data screens displaying live output, battery charge cycles, grid maps that highlighted every household, every meter, every backup generator. For the first time she seemed small, like a child lost in a cathedral. I walked her down the aisles of equipment, explaining how each component worked in harmony, the microinverters translating sunlight into alternating current, the battery arrays smoothing fluctuations, the supervisory control unit rerouting power seamlessly during maintenance. She poked a finger at a touchscreen showing yesterday's outage event. "You could have died," she whispered. I sighed, placing a hand on the console. "Maybe," I replied. "But power isn't life. Connection is. When you shut it off, you cut more than lights, you cut hope." Her eyes flickered as she absorbed that, shoulders loosening. Down the row I led her to a small display labeled, Community Benefit Fund. Funds collected from energy credits were being funneled into local schools, hospital upgrades, and a fund for weather-related disasters. Posters on the wall showed children celebrating a new computer lab, a rural clinic with freshly installed air conditioning. I caught her eye. "You've been fighting something that's done more good than harm," I said. Silence stretched between us until her breath came out trembling. I never knew," she stammered. Outside, the community band had set up near the orchard fringes and was tuning their guitars. Laughs rose as neighbors tested picnic setups under the shade of old oak trees. I gestured toward them. "Join them," I said. "Everyone deserves a place here." She hesitated, then stepped toward the canopy of hammocks where children chased each other while parents chatted and sipped iced tea powered by our solar still. For the first time she smiled, tentative but real. I turned to leave but paused, realizing this moment held a lesson deeper than any legal victory. I climbed into my pickup and watched from the window as Karen approached the local librarian who had once decried the turbine noise, now shaking Karen's hand gratefully because last winter the backup batteries kept her freezers humming through a blizzard. Community threads tangled into a tapestry of shared benefit. That afternoon I hosted an open forum in the workshop bay, inviting everyone to dissect bylaws, easements, and the intricate dance between private associations and public utilities. Karen arrived early, carrying a notepad. She asked questions, some timid, some pointed about tariff rates and net metering. Rick Thompson sat beside her, scribbling notes too, a silent olive branch. I walked them through cost analyses, showing how demand response programs could reward energy-saving households with credits, how surplus generation could be sold back to the county at peak rates. The flip chart filled with diagrams of cooperative models that blurred the lines between HOA dues and energy subscriptions. By sunset, the markers ink had faded but community plans had crystallized. A subcommittee to revisit HOA guidelines, a joint task force to monitor grid performance, and a pledge from Karen Hawthorne to resign as HOA president and join that committee not as a tyrant but as a trustee. Word of the transformation spread like wildfire through online forums and local news feeds. By the next morning, agricultural co-ops called to partner on microgrid expansions. A local historian requested an interview about how one landowner's vision rewrote decades of communal conflict, and the county invited me to present at their next energy summit. Yet amid the praise, I never forgot the heavy wooden sign that had marked our confrontation. I had it refurbished and mounted it beside a new dedication plaque. Closed by control, opened by community. Beneath it I engraved a simple motto: Power with People. A year later, at the annual Harvest Festival held beneath the turbine blades, I watched Karen hand out solar-powered lanterns to children dancing around a bonfire. She sought me out and with genuine warmth said, "Thank you for teaching me that power is a trust, not a threat." I smiled, feeling the weight of a year's struggle lift. "Thank you," I replied, "for trusting us enough to change." As twilight settled, neighbors gathered for a final toast. Mason jars filled with local mead, backs turned toward the cottonwood grove, faces alight with unity. Rick Thompson raised his jar. "To unexpected lessons," he said, "and to those brave enough to learn." Glass rang against glass. Laughter echoed across fields once defined by fences and feuds. In that moment I understood the true meaning of grid ownership. Not the authority to control, but the responsibility to connect, to empower, and to uplift. That story of an entitled HOA president undone not by force but by fellowship spread beyond our valley, inspiring similar cooperatives across the state. And whenever I'm asked how I transformed conflict into collaboration, I recall the day the lights went out, and how restoring them meant lighting a spark of community that no switch could ever turn off.